What is going on, everyone? Welcome into our next top 10 positional breakdowns video for the 2022 NFL Draft. Today we've got the linebackers. I just want to remind you to make sure you come back here on YouTube for draft night and really all weekend. I will be live for every single pick, giving my reactions and analysis to every pick. It's going to be a ton of fun. I know you've got a lot of options out there to consume the draft, and I really appreciate you taking some time to enjoy the draft with me. Also, if you enjoy my draft content, I want to remind you can support my channel on my Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. You won't just support my channel, but if you enjoy my draft content, you'll get exclusive stuff as well. You'll get my full draft rankings almost completely done with every player here. I just got some corners and some interior offensive linemen to wrap up, but I've got, let's see here, 32 linebackers done. So if there's a linebacker you like that doesn't make this video, you can head over to Patreon, see what I said about him. Also going to be starting up 7-round mock drafts, team specific there on Patreon for all 32 teams. Going to be wrapping those up throughout this week. So a lot of great content there on Patreon. You'll support my channel in the process. Really appreciate you. And please do hit that like button. If nothing else, really helps me out. Let's get into this linebacker class. Starting off at number 10, Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma. And I'll be completely straightforward. You know, I think linebackers 10 and 9 here are a clear crop below the rest. I just don't see Brian Asamoah or a next guy truly becoming like 3-down starters. But that said, Asamoah has some upside. He, I guess, has a chance. I would just bet against it happening. I think he's really weak and unanticipatory against the run. He just is very reactionary against the run, and that can lead him to, you know, basically when you're 6 foot, 225 pounds like him, if you're going to be impactful against the run, you got to get there before the offensive lineman. And it doesn't matter how fast you are, you have to anticipate the run. And he just doesn't really do that. He doesn't beat offensive linemen to the gap, which means linemen are able to get in front of him. And once an offensive lineman is able to kind of get Asamoah into their gravity well, if you will, it's over. Like, he's going to get swallowed up in the run very, very quickly. Now, if you can get him in space, he's got that pursuit speed. He's a solid tackler. But I just have serious concerns about him being a 3-down player at the next level. As a coverage player, he's pretty solid. I think zone instincts are average with plenty of room to grow. He's still a young player, declaring as a redshirt junior. But man coverage, very smooth athleticism. I mean, he is, as an athlete, pretty comparable to a running back. So he's going to be able to man up running backs out of the backfield pretty well. And I think he can hold his own against tight ends. He's a little bit on the shorter side, so taller tight ends might give him fits, but I think he can be a competent kind of dime linebacker or a weak side linebacker for a base 4-3, but maybe not a 3-down starter. The nice thing about him is he has the speed and tackling ability that he will be an impact on special teams while he can potentially develop his game. Then we have my number 9 player here, Malcolm Rodriguez out of Oklahoma State. This is not someone I've heard too much about. He's not someone I don't think is going to be in a lot of top 10 linebacker lists. Maybe he will. But really fun player. He's only 5'11", 234 pounds. So he's going to have some size deficiencies, and certainly against the run, those show up. I do think he's a lot better against the run than, say, Brian Asamoah, and that's probably the biggest difference, because these guys as athletes are very comparable, honestly. Malcolm Rodriguez came out and ran a 4.52, whereas Brian Asamoah is a 4.56. Their broad jump, their vertical jump are very similar, and I think on the field they look comparable as far as athletes go. But Rodriguez is actually a little bit bigger, and I think much smarter as well. Maybe it's just that extra year of experience there. But he definitely will shoot gaps. He will do what we talked about as far as beating tackles and guards to the spot. He'll anticipate the run and get there. Maybe a little bit more committal as well at going when he sees it. And I definitely think his zone instincts are much better than what we talked about with Asamoah there. I think he keeps his head on a swivel a little bit more, understands the route concepts that are coming his way. So I think as far as a day one impact, he's just a little bit better, but very similar like knocks as far as what his upside could be. He just doesn't have that physically imposing size. So as a Mike, like as a full-time starter, I don't know if you're always going to be happy with him as a middle linebacker. Now, he did much more of that at Oklahoma State. I think he can handle that because he is a little bit thicker, but again, shorter arms, the ability to kind of stack and shed, it's just going to be something that holds him back at the next level. But I guess with Rodriguez, I wouldn't be terribly surprised either if he became a quality like number 2 linebacker. I just really don't expect him to even reach that, or if he does, become like a star player just because of those physical limitations. But he is fast, smart, and tough, which is a good combination. So both these players for me are 4th, 5th round grades. They kind of have the athleticism you want to gamble on at this position in the mid rounds there. And that's really all I have to say about them. Just kind of wait and see sort of how well the game clicks for them at the next level. But then we get into guys that have a little bit more size, speed, upside projections, and that starts with Christian Harris out of Alabama. And man, was I underwhelmed watching Christian Harris. I was really excited to get to him because he came out and ran a 4.44 40. He's a true junior out of Alabama. Size a little bit on the shorter side, but almost 6'1", 226. You can get by at that size. So I was like, man, I can't wait. I feel like I'm going to love this guy. Have a lot of upside projection for him and all this stuff. And boo-hoo, I was underwhelmed, man. I was stunned at how soft of a player he is. When you think Alabama linebacker under Nick Saban, you think a guy that's going to get nasty in the trenches, play tough, and enjoy the physical aspect of the game. And with Christian Harris, I would strongly question that that's something he will be doing at the next level. I mentioned he is already a smaller player, but at least like with Rodriguez we talked about, he wants to get nasty. He enjoys that part of it. I don't think Christian Harris gives a damn, honestly, as far as the run game as a whole. Was just very non-committal. Very rarely did he anticipate and trigger early. Of course, he has the speed and the tackling ability in space. That's why I project him as a weak side linebacker prospect. But if you're a 3-4 team, I don't know how realistic it is that you're going to draft Christian Harris, because someone that is able to play him as a weak side backer more consistently is probably going to have him higher up on your boards. So I think there's a little bit of a scheme dependency with him in that way. I will say with Christian Harris, though, I don't want to just totally talk down on him, is his coverage instincts, at least in man coverage, are really good. I think that is the aspect of the game that he thrives in the most. I think he's one of the best man cover linebackers in this class. And it's not just the speed. The speed obviously helps, but he seems to really like anticipate what's coming, and he is sticky in man coverage. So I do really like that aspect of him. Again, a little bit shorter, so tight ends might be able to kind of body him up, especially because he isn't the strongest player. So bigger, more physical tight ends could give him some fits, but covering the flat, covering hook zones, covering running backs in man coverage. He even has the speed to cover a lot of slot receivers as well, by the way. So that is a nice upside projection. If he can just get a little bit better against the run, where you're more comfortable with him out there in a 3-down role, then he could become a full-time starter and maybe even play like a second starter in a 3-4 defense. But man, I am not comfortable projecting that based on what we saw. The last thing I'll say about Christian Harris is he is a fantastic blitzer. So to me, it's like, it feels like he just really was checked out in the run game. But when they asked him to blitz, get after the quarterback, cover, that's where he showed his best flashes. So at 21 years old, you definitely are hopeful that he's going to continue to grow both physically and mentally and potentially become a starter. So I do have him, like I said, a chop above of those last two players that we had, because I think the upside projection is absolutely there. But I think he's a pretty far ways away and was an underwhelming watch, considering you expect these Bama defenders to just be so tuned in and physical and I just don't think Christian Harris checked a lot of those boxes for me. And then my number 7 linebacker is Quay Walker out of Georgia. And, I think this is a little bit lower than most people are on Walker. Most people have him like 3 to 5, so I don't think I'm some hater. He just didn't quite check as many boxes as some of these other guys. So the one thing I do want to say about these Georgia linebackers is their job was just easier than any other linebackers in this class, and most linebackers you'll see ever. They had this elite front. They were in a scheme that really pinpointed 1 or 2 specific skill sets for each of these guys, and they had 3 different guys. You had Quay Walker, you had Nakobe Dean, and then there's another guy in this class down the board a little bit, Channing Tindall out of Georgia, comes in at number 12 for me. So there's like a lot of real athletes here, and they just didn't have to prove a lot of those true 3-down skill sets, which I think just adds some more questions as far as how they'll handle more and different role assignments at the next level. So for me, that's just an explanation of why a guy like Quay Walker's grade maybe comes in a little bit lower. I don't think he had to do or prove quite as much as some of these other guys. So I'm definitely not some hater on Quay Walker. I like him as a prospect. He's in this group really as a 3rd, 4th round guy and someone that can absolutely ascend to a starting level. So with Quay Walker, I think his biggest strength is going to be that run defense. Now, again, he had these wide open run lanes. He just didn't have to anticipate, stack, shed, and prove on a consistent level how good of a run defender he truly can be. But he was the best, at least diagnosing runs of the 3 linebackers there at Georgia, and I think that's very promising. I think he has the full size to consistently thump, but again, just a little bit more question marks as far as his technique when it comes to stacking and shedding, his ability to consistently do that at the next level. But overall, I like how he projects as a run defender. I don't think the 4.5 speed, he ran a 4.52. I don't think that truly showed all the time on tape. If you look at his 10-yard split, he is more towards the bottom of this class, and I had already noted that he's kind of a slow starter. So that's something to note. I don't think he consistently plays at that 4.52 speed because he really needs a long track to get to that speed. So those are some question marks, and I think that translates to some concerns in coverage as well. He's not just a slow starter. I think he is a little bit more tight. He's not a very fluid man coverage defender. And of these 3 linebackers with Tindall and Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker was probably asked the least as far as coverage. So again, just a lot more to prove in that regard. I compare him to Malik Harrison, who was a late 3rd round pick out of Ohio State, big bodied guy with a lot of upside and flashes as a run defender, but a lot of aspects of his game that he needed to, bring along and develop at the next level. And that's where I see Quay Walker. I think he can become a phenomenal starter as a early down run defender. And thanks to his blitzing ability with hopefully a little bit more improvement in his zone anticipation and ability to play in coverage, he can become a 3-down starter. But I don't think you draft him and say, okay, great, we have a starting linebacker. I think there's maybe going to be a little bit more of a learning curve just with development and a different role assignment. So I do have, sticking in the SEC, Damone Clark just above him. Very close there. You'll see 6.18 grade on Clark, 6.17 on Quay Walker, both 3rd, 4th round projections. And I do think Walker has a little bit more upside because he's just a little bit bigger, maybe a little more physical and a little bit faster, at least once he gets his top speed. But Damone Clark is, in his own right, a very nice athlete. And I almost compared him to Devondre Campbell, who just made the All-Pro team for the Green Bay Packers. I thought that was a little bit too ambitious. But I will say that a lot of his traits line up. Size, speed, length, it's all there. And the tackling ability really stands out for Damone Clark, because when you're quick like he is, when you're fast and you can get there in a hurry and you have these long pterodactyl arms to just wrap guys up, he's an incredibly consistent tackler, and you'll be able to lean into that. which I think will give him a little bit more upside immediately as a potential starter out the gate. I think he's also a more fluid athlete than someone like Quay Walker. I like, in general, his coverage ability. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't impressive. It's not like he had these unreal zone instincts, but he, in general, had a solid feel. He kind of carried defenders in the second level. His ball production wasn't really there. He didn't make a ton of plays in coverage, but you can see the beginnings of some zone feel there. And in man coverage, he's just long and fast and quick. And if he can begin to anticipate routes a little bit more, feel that in route is coming, feel that this guy is, going to hit me on an option route and break into the flat, then he can start to close the distance there in man coverage a little bit quicker early on and become a better man coverage defender. So there's definitely a lot of upside with him as far as a coverage player, his ability to play in space. He doesn't really play up to his size, I would just say, as a run defender. He's just kind of, I don't know the right word. It's not soft. He can play physical when he needs to, but he's, I guess, passive in run defense. He just kind of feels things out, uses that length to kind of elude blocks, but he can get locked up in the run game. He just doesn't really have a ton of raw play strength like a guy maybe like Quay Walker does. So that's another comparison there to like Devondre Campbell, who's actually a little bit better in space, kind of using that length to pursue and distance himself from blockers and be a really secure tackler. So I like Damone Clark. I think he can be a potential day one starter. There's not any like huge red flags in his game. He just needs to kind of continue developing his game. Then I have Troy Anderson, number 5. And he is a fascinating player, like one of the most polarizing players in this draft. And my comparison for him is Isaiah Simmons, maybe, but not really, but actually maybe. I don't entirely know if that's crazy. Just if you look at their physical measurables, pretty damn close. Both guys almost, Isaiah Simmons just over 6'4", Troy Anderson just under 6'4". Both came in right around that 240-pound mark. Both guys run 4.44 40s, can jump out the gym, a lot of juice. Both guys a little bit tight in their hips as far as throttling down and changing direction in man coverage. The main difference is, and I will also say both guys were projecting kind of a new position at the next level some way. Isaiah Simmons played free safety at Clemson, was going to have to come down and beef up and play linebacker, so we didn't really know how good he was going to be in that role. And Troy Anderson was a freaking running back for 4 years and then finally got to play linebacker in his final year. Yeah, 6'4", 240 pounds. They used him as a running back, and he was pretty efficient at it too. Like, he is a freak athlete. And, he was in 2019, he was a running back linebacker hybrid. So he was in both position rooms, not really fully committing to linebacker. And honestly, early on, as a linebacker, you could see he just didn't have a good feel in zone coverage, was just kind of reacting, not really reading the quarterback's eyes or feeling anything out in zone. And then in 2020, their season did not exist because of COVID. In 2021, he comes into the year as a full-time linebacker. They dropped the running back thing. So early on in that final season, his first year as a true full-time starting linebacker, it was the same deal where he didn't really know what he was fully doing as a coverage linebacker. But you load up Montana State's FCS playoff games, he was a different player. And he was moving his head around, bopping around, carrying zone defenders, reading the quarterback's eyes. That to me is incredibly promising for him. Again, the speed is absolutely there. It showed as a running back. It showed as a linebacker. There's plays where if he's a mid-read in cover 2, he can run with slot receivers up the seam. It's legit. As a run defender, he's very much, I don't want to call him a headhunter because I don't think he's like a dirty player, but he's pretty reactionary in that way as well, but he can definitely fire into the backfield and hit you and make some impressive plays against the run. He's a full-size dude at 6'3.5", 240 pounds. I think his play strength is something he can continue to kind of hit the weight room and get a little bit stronger as a full-time linebacker. And he's just a very raw player, but that speed is real, man. And he's not Isaiah Simmons, but very similarly, like, just put a freak in the middle of the field, coach him up, and let him grow over time. And for me, Troy Anderson's really intriguing, and you can get him in like the 3rd round. I definitely think there's bust potential with him, just because he does need to grow. But God, he's an intriguing player, and if he goes in like the 2nd round, I'm really not going to knock it or question it all that much, because he's just, the upside is so intriguing, and his career path is so intriguing. Out of the tiny schools, a guy that played running back and missed a year because of COVID. It's just very fascinating. And then my number 4 linebacker, this is one I'm going to get some heat for, but I'm going to stand by it. It's Nakobe Dean out of Georgia. I have a 2nd to a 3rd round grade on him. I think the concept of drafting him in the 1st round is kind of insane to me. I just don't see how he can return value in that way. He's like a much worse version of like Patrick Queen. And Patrick Queen has not been able to be consistent at the next level. And I think Patrick Queen was a lot faster than Nakobe Dean. I think Dean was avoiding his 40 time for a reason, because I think he knows, not that his tape is bad, but I think he knows that he kind of had to run in the 4.5s to warrant a 1st round pick, and probably a high 4.5 because he's such a small guy. You know, Devin Bush ran like a 4.5 flat and he went 10th overall. Devin Bush was a much more proven and instinctive player than Nakobe Dean. I think he was afraid, like, I'm like a 4.58, 4.62 guy, and if I run 4.6, I'm screwed. I'm going in the 2nd and 3rd round. So he didn't run at all. And I think that's pretty telling. I think that's about right for his speed. He's not even close to the fastest linebacker in this class. I think Troy Anderson's faster. I think like Christian Harris is faster. So if you're just drafting him for speed in the 1st round, that's stupid. There's other guys that are actually faster than him that did more than he did when it comes to solid run defense, shedding blocks, and frankly, as a zone coverage defender. I think both of those things are huge criticisms of Nakobe Dean. Now, we can go back to those undersized linebackers at 9 and 10. Both guys probably faster than Nakobe Dean, by the way, Malcolm Rodriguez and Brian Asamoah. But what we said about Asamoah was like, he did not anticipate the run. He did not beat offensive linemen to the spot so that he could make an impact between the tackles. Nakobe Dean will do that. I like his processor. He is very quick to react in the run game, but he still does have those size deficiencies. And if he's not elite at that at the next level, he is going to get drowned out in the run game like immediately. If a guard or a tackle gets their hands on him, he's stuck. He's not going anywhere. He doesn't have a lot of play strength or any of that. And then when it comes to his coverage ability, I think he's great in man coverage. Very comfortable there. The athleticism shows. He is very twitched up. Like, he accelerates well. His agility, his change of direction is top notch for a linebacker. So in man coverage, that shows. But we can go back to what I said about the Georgia linebackers, and his zone coverage is entirely underdeveloped. Something he could get there. But that's also what you're hoping happens with Christian Harris, with Troy Anderson, with some of these other guys that I'm going to rank ahead of him. There's not a huge difference between his ability in zone and most guys in this class. In fact, I think a lot of guys show a lot more ability to look around, use your eyes, read the quarterback, try and anticipate the route combinations in front of you so that you can get in the way of passing lanes. There's just not a whole lot of evidence of Nakobe Dean doing that at all. And a big part of that is because they really leaned into his blitzing ability. His best trait is his run and chase ability and his ability as a blitzer. That's got value, but how much value does that have? 1st round value? Absolutely not. I think he's Jayon Brown, who is still available as a free agent, I think. You can get him for very cheap. Like, why would you spend a 1st round pick on Nakobe Dean, who's got to be a weak side linebacker as a run and chase guy, and will need time to develop in zone coverage to maybe be as good of a cover player as a Jayon Brown, and someone that's a really good blitzer like Jayon Brown, as a kind of number 2 linebacker. Why would you draft that guy in the first round when you can just get that guy off the street in a handful of linebackers? He's a good player. I think Jayon Brown's a very good player. But I think the first round talk on him is pretty wild and solely based on the fact that he was on a national championship defense. So I do think he's one of the more overrated players in this class. I'm sorry. I'm not afraid to admit it. I just don't see the high upside with him as this dominant 3-down linebacker, which if you're taking a linebacker in the first round, which has a terrible hit rate, like 3 out of the 15 first round linebackers over the last 6 or 7 years have actually hit. And those 3 were all like true elite level freaks. Nakobe Dean is small and he's not even the fastest linebacker in this class. So that's my Nakobe Dean spiel. You guys will have to let me know in the comments if you think I'm crazy or if I sold you on that. But Chad Muma is my number 3 linebacker here out of Wyoming. And I think Muma is comparable to Nakobe Dean because I think he's a little bit more raw. He's only a 1-year starter, and his zone feel, just like we said with Nakobe Dean, he's got to figure it out, man. He just does not have a great feel for what's in front of him. But I will say, I think he's even more fluid in space than Nakobe Dean. He's not quite as fast, but he has really rare kind of hip fluidity, and he can just kind of warp around the field, and his movement skills are really exciting. And I think with his size, he's a much better projection as a run defender. Now, he, again, just a 1-year starter, doesn't always know what he's looking at, and he can be a little bit late to the play. But if he can hit the film room, I think he's going to be a better player than Nakobe Dean, who, again, I think Nakobe Dean also really needs to hit the film room. I just like Muma's upside better because of the size and comparable athleticism. I think Chad Muma has a better chance to be a scheme-independent Mike linebacker as well. So that's Chad Muma. He is a bit of a projection. I compare him to Cody Barton, who came out of Utah, I think. Tested really well, went in the 3rd round, where I think Chad Muma is going to go. And that doesn't sound like much, but I actually think Cody Barton's going to get a real chance for the Seahawks this year. You know, he's been playing behind Bobby Wagner and Brooks, right? The other linebacker there. But he's going to, I think, get a real chance to start this year for Seattle and could prove after 2 or 3 years of development to be a really damn good starter. And I think that's the projection with Chad Muma. You're not quite like stoked about him starting on day 1, whereas Nakobe Dean, I think you have a little bit more clear cut of a role for him as that weak side run and chase linebacker and a blitzer on 3rd down. I think Muma is going to take a little bit more time. So I guess that's a little bit of a preference. I have 2nd to 3rd round grades on both of them. So again, I'm not trying to totally shred Nakobe Dean. But I think as an upside projection and the flashes that we saw from Chad Muma, to hope that, as a 1-year starter, he's going to continue to grow. That's where I would prefer to gamble on the upside. And then I'm in pain here because my number 2 linebacker is Leo Chanel, just off the grade alone. Now, I will say in a lot of mock drafts, like a lot of what I would do mock drafts, I've actually been taking Chanel as the first linebacker off the board because I think his upside is the highest of anyone in this class. But when I kind of revisited Devin Lloyd, getting ready for this video, I was like, we'll talk about Lloyd in a second, but he is rock solid day 1 starter. Like, I had to bump his grade up to a 6.6, which for me is a day 1 starter, unlikely high-end starter. So we'll get to Lloyd in a second, but Leo Chanel gets that 6.50 grade, which if you can visit the kind of categories for the different grading levels. In that 6.5 range, that's sort of your boom or bust range. And Leo Chanel has a lot of boom in him. He is every bit of 250 pounds. He's stronger than a lot of defensive ends in this class. He's 6'2.5". He has 4.5 speed. He can jump out the gym. He's quick. He is an elite athlete. He stacks up very similarly to Demario Davis, who's been a underrated, frankly, all-pro caliber linebacker who does a little bit of everything in the league. And I think Leo Chanel can get to that point. I really do. Where do you even want to start? I think you start with his physicality in run defense. So now I will say, like, that part of his game, I'm not worried about. He's going to be a dominant run defender. I think he's the best run defender in this class and has the highest upside of any run defender in this class. His arm length is a little bit shorter, which can hurt his ability to stack and shed, consistently getting those hands inside. That's maybe the only knock on him, seriously. So I guess that's why he's not an A grade for run defense. It's hard to get that, but he is well above average in that department. You can mug him up on the center and he can hold up. Like, his arm strength is good enough to literally just handle a center, which is very similar to the way the Patriots have used Dante Hightower over the years. So he is a move piece. He can play Mike. He can play on the edge as a 3-4 outside backer on like over and odd fronts. I mentioned you can play him like loaded up, mugged on the line of scrimmage. He is going to be a physical force, and he's good against the run. Like, I love that aspect of his game. So that you can check all the boxes there. So that does give him a certain floor that you wouldn't necessarily say for a boom or bust player. But if you're drafting a linebacker in the first round, the hope is he can become a true 3-down player and a cover player as well. And that's maybe the question with Leo Chenal because of the way Wisconsin used him and how young he is at the position. He just doesn't have a lot of snaps under his belt. So he falls into the same category with Nakobe Dean, with Chad Muma, with Christian Harris, where it's like, he's just got to hit the film room and get better with his route anticipation, ability to understand what concepts are coming his way, and to read the quarterback's eyes. Physically speaking, just like Demario Davis, there is no reason he can't be one of, if not the best, cover linebacker in this class. He's got the speed. He's got the acceleration. I think his change of direction isn't quite what you see with like Nakobe Dean, but it's certainly good enough. And if he's anticipating quick enough, he can accelerate and close that space in other ways. And man, I get fired up watching him. I thought as his season went on, he got a little bit better with his eyes in zone coverage. So that was really good to see that growth. And the last thing you can say about him is, even if he's going to take some time to get there as far as his ability as a cover player, he is a remarkable blitzer. Like, good luck blocking this guy with a running back, because he shoots through the hole like a missile, and he's bigger than any running back in the league. Even like A.J. Dillon, Derrick Henry, he's even bigger than those guys. So that's the most extreme running back example. Think of like a 205-pound running back trying to block Leo Chenal in a blitz. So he messes up all of your protections. You have to basically use a lineman to block him as a blitzer. And that just messes with the rules of the protection schemes of a lot of teams. So even if he can't develop in coverage, which I think he can, just like Demario Davis did over the years, continue to get better in that regard, use that speed and anticipation to his advantage, putting him out on the field early on, you can at least blitz the crap out of him on third down, so he's going to have functionality on all 3 downs. But again, that's even if he doesn't develop in coverage, which I feel very good saying he will, given his athleticism, his youth, both himself as a 21-year-old and his youth at the position. He hasn't played a ton. So, man, it hurts me a little bit to not have him as my number 1 linebacker, but I eventually caved and put Devin Lloyd back as number 1, because revisiting his film, he is just so complete. And I don't think he's, he might not be as good as Leo Chenal at the next level. But if you just say, I need someone that can start for me at linebacker, be a locker room guy, a leader that can understand my defense, communicate things, contribute in the run game, be a solid coverage defender, like, that's Devin Lloyd immediately. So there's a ton of value in that high floor for me with Devin Lloyd. Honestly, he reminds me a ton of Darius Leonard, who I've had moments of being critical of. I think he's a top 5 linebacker in the NFL right now, but minus the peanut punch. I think the thing that makes Darius Leonard a top 5 linebacker is how consistently he has that rare ability to force fumbles. The other parts of his game are very good, but he has his deficiencies in coverage because he's not this incredible athlete, right? If he gets manned up on faster tight ends or slot receivers, you can see him kind of getting cooked. His sideline to sideline speed, it's not elite, but secure tackler, team leader, brings the energy, and I think Darius Leonard's really gotten better with his zone feel as well. I would say that I will wrap up by saying that is Devin Lloyd's biggest strength is he kind of has an eye in the back of his head when he's in zone coverage. He just naturally kind of ebbs and flows with the flow of the passing game. And it's really frustrating for quarterbacks because if you think that crossing route's going to sneak over the top of his head and you can throw that with anticipation before Devin Lloyd kind of gets a break on it, he's already moving in that direction and forces you to come off of that read. So in that way, another decent comparison for him is like Fred Warner. But that was dangerous territory for me because Fred Warner is just a next level cover player, in my opinion. But I wouldn't be flabbergasted. I think that's the first time I've said that on this channel. If Fred Warner or if Devin Lloyd reached a level of Fred Warner, but I just do think it's a little bit unlikely. I don't think he's quite the athlete that Fred Warner is. But that trait, as far as the zone coverage feel, is comparable. So I caved. Devin Lloyd's my number one linebacker. I've been saying Leo Chenal LB1 for a long time, but I'm still a huge Leo Chenal stan. Probably about as high as you're going to see. I think you can spend a first-round pick on Leo Chenal, just as you can with Devin Lloyd. But yeah, those are your top 10 linebackers, or my top 10 linebackers. Definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I really appreciate you watching. Check out my Patreon. We're going to be getting those 7-round mock drafts up over the next few days. Really looking forward to those. It's going to be a ton of fun. And yeah, we'll see you later. Peace out.